For 2 years, I was refusing help. And then when it got very out of control in college, he's the one that said to me, Jordan, at this point, you're choosing to live like this. And
Wow. Yeah.
yeah, and it was,
Yeah,
I
that's
mean,
good. Mm-hmm.
right. And it really hit home with me. So we went through that very dramatic stage at a very young part of our lives together. And he still was very patient with me. And I think that's all he had to do. He's never offered me solutions. He's never tried to change me. When things are bad, he just sits next to me and waits them out. And I think that's the best partner for me when it comes to my mental illness, because I need to figure it out, but I need someone that isn't judging me because of it.
Welcome back. We are on today with my guest Jordan from Listen Lucy on 2-0 for Dish It podcast. I'm Angie S., the founder of angies.com. Link in the show notes, where I'm a health coach. If you want to work with me, you can get in touch via the website or email directly at hello@angie-s.com. So today I brought Jordan on to talk about how to manage anxiety, panic attacks, and depression. How to see the signs in yourself and in others so you can best get help and support those around you who suffer from it. I'd like to start with this quote I saw in one of Jordan's articles. The source of the quote is unknown, but it's really poetic, and it goes, "My anxiety tried to bury me. It didn't know I was a seed." Let's begin. Hi, Jordan.
Hello, Angie. How are you?
I'm very well. How are you?
I'm doing so great. Very excited to be chatting with you today.
Big welcome onto the podcast, and thank you so much for joining me. Your website really touched me on a deep level, and I just really love your mission on creating a less judgmental and more accepting world, and with a focus on mental health. And so I'm just really humbled by how open you are with your story, because I find it so helpful. So before we dive into it, can you please introduce yourself, where you live, and what you do?
Sure. Well, first, thank you for saying all of that and for following Listen Lucy. I've been doing this a long time now, and it never gets old. I really just appreciate all the support that I have. It's just super cool. So my name is Jordan, as you have already introduced me, and I am the creator of Listen Lucy. I started my organization 7 years ago after my own pretty difficult battle with mental illness. So I have generalized anxiety disorder and panic disorder. I was diagnosed when I was 19 years old. Unfortunately, that's what keeps getting longer and longer ago. I keep aging. But I really, really struggled when I went away to college. And we're going to talk a lot about my story, I know, as we, as this conversation evolves. But as I was struggling and trying to find ways to cope, I found this love of writing, and that it helped me describe things that seemed indescribable at the time. And it became this major coping technique for me. And years later, I wanted to create an outlet where people could feel that same sense of relief and be able to share their stories without ridicule or judgment. So that's how Listen Lucy, my organization, started. And then it evolved to where it is now, that I speak all over to middle schools, high schools, colleges, universities, and other organizations as well, and share my story, raise awareness and around mental health. And then obviously I just launched Listen Lucy Presents, which is now a place where people, schools and organizations can go to find really powerful, impactful speakers that are ready to share their lived experiences with mental health as well.
Wow. Okay. That's wow. So many things that I like.
Yes,
I want to ask you about. This is great. Like, I'm just like, there's so many things that I just want to ask you about. So
I'm ready. Ask away.
So just before we dive into is there a particular reason why you've chosen to go to schools and colleges and university versus maybe like workplaces, for example?
Sure. So I started off with schools and colleges and universities because that's where I have struggled. That's where my worst times of my life were. And when I decided to get help when I was in college, when I finally, broke, I didn't know where to go. And I was so embarrassed about the idea of battling with mental health and being labeled as having a mental illness, that it stopped me for, I mean, at least 2 years of it
Mm.
made me refuse help. So I wanted to go back to the time in my life where I really needed somebody like Listen Lucy to come into my school. I would say over the past year, I've started going into corporations a little bit more. They are also the culture. I hope that I'm seeing. I hope this is true, but the culture seems to be shifting. Where there's a whole different stigma attached to being a working professional struggling with mental illness. So that is becoming more acceptable to talk about. The
Mm.
more people come out and share their stories. So I have dabbled a little bit in the corporate world and would love to continue to do so, because that's kind of where my area of expertise is leaning, because I now am a working professional. But that's why I decided to start with schools. And that's why I have such a passion about speaking to young people, because I will never forget what it's like to be in their shoes.
Yeah, and I guess it also makes sense because it can start really young, and obviously it's always best when anything like that is addressed really as soon as possible, because things don't really go away, and all of a sudden you're in your late 20s, early 30s, or 40s or 50s, and then all of a sudden it starts, bam, it explodes. It just, you can't take it anymore, and the breakdown ensues, and I think also the thing with social media, and I know that's something you talk about in your story on your website, Listen Lucy, how social media, with the bullying on there, and how you experience that as well. And I think there is that facet to it. And also in the corporate
Absolutely.
world, for like, the older generations, like for example, like me, like I'm 41, we didn't grow up with social media, but now there is social media. And it's like how do we adapt as well to, because Instagram is all glossy.
Oh, I mean, I could talk about that for years, taking a breath. But so I'm 32, and I was just on the cusp of this social media explosion. So there really wasn't anything in place for anything that was happening on social media when I was a senior in high school, and that's the year I was bullied.
Senior in high school, what's the age? How old are you when you
18,
Okay.
18, yes.
Hmm.
So, these social media platforms started to pop up where it started to become, you weren't just around your peers at school, but whenever you left, you were still able to be in contact with each other.
Mm,
And it was a whole different world. And then the anonymous factor of online
yeah.
really, I mean, the explosion of how much cyberbullying is happening. And then, growing up as a kid now is so difficult because everything's in comparison. You see all these filtered versions of people's lives that
Yes.
aren't true, and you're constantly comparing yourself, and it is so bad for your mental health. So there's such a connection for sure of social media, and it's not just kids either. Adults, we do it too,
Yeah.
of seeing people further ahead in their careers or having this beautiful vacation. Well, you have no idea what's going on in their lives. That's 1 second of a picture that they filtered, right?
Yes. Yes. And it's funny because I had this conversation with a friend of mine. She has two kids, and she's my age as well. And she was showing me these accounts on Instagram, and they were really triggering to her. She was like, she couldn't say enough bad stuff about them. She felt really, really triggered. But I could tell why she was triggered, because she knew these people personally. She knew their background story, and what they were showing online to her seemed wrong because she knew stuff about them that was relating to her. But I was trying to make her understand, and I guess maybe it's a bit of a tangent, but I was trying to get her to see an important thing is that we have to see why are things that we're seeing bothering us.
Right.
I could see it, from my end, looking at her, I could see it. She's struggling in her own life with different things, and then she was seeing that person being all glossy online when
Right.
she really does not agree with how she lives her life and whatnot. So it's a whole judgment thing around it. But even I, for example, I had to stop following. There's this account. She's this actress in Hollywood called Kaylee Kuko. I don't know how to say her
Yeah.
name. Right? Yeah, yeah.
Yes, I know. Yeah.
She lives my dream life in terms of
Her.
she's in the countryside. She has horses, dogs. She has she looks so super happy with her husband. They're so in love, whatnot. And and I'm like, and I had to sort of like stop looking at it so much, because I was like, all it does is making me feel like, oh, but I'm not out in the countryside. I don't have animals. I don't have that dream partnership. But obviously we don't know what's going on behind it. But we
Oh,
have
sure.
social media is it can make you feel less than, even though it shouldn't be.
Oh, without a doubt. And you have to remind yourself that, like, this is a silly example, but I have a 7-month-old son and my husband, and the three of us just went on our first family vacation. And I posted, a couple photos on our way home of like how magical and non-relaxing the vacation was. I did say that. But it was our first vacation as a family. The photos that I pictured, or I'm sorry, that I posted, I love them, and my son looks so cute. I didn't post photos of like us, my husband and I arguing or
No, of
trying to get.
course.
So just in like a silly example like that, it's such a filtered version that we have to remind ourselves too, because in this world where we're constantly comparing ourselves, social media has played such a huge role, and has become so detrimental to our mental health that talking
Hmm.
about it is so, so important, especially, when it comes to this topic for sure.
The one thing about social media, I think one of the reasons why also it's affecting so many of us because we overexpose. We can just tap into anyone's life that we've never met, like one version of it anyway. And I think we have to remind ourselves that just like in real life, when you go to the office or when you meet friends, no one's out there every day talking about, how constipated they are, how many arguments they've had with their partner, or how, no one's telling. It's
Yeah,
part of life.
absolutely.
It's part of decorum, and we don't want to look like a train wreck. Like there's a thing as such as vulnerability, and then there's also just overflowing with too much
Sure.
information. That's just so it's that balance that we haven't really found. I think that we're still trying to figure out. And there's again, and then to circle into our topic is that because you talk about isolation a lot, if we're not used to people opening up about mental health, and especially on social media, sometimes it's very hard. Everyone seems to be living such a glossy life. We start to feel even more isolated. So I want to ask you how isolation happened, but just before, you mentioned something in your introduction that you suffered from anxiety disorder and panic disorder. Can you explain the difference between the two?
Sure. Sure. So I have generalized anxiety disorder and panic disorder. And for me, the way that I can best describe that is, my generalized anxiety is more of this like nagging worry that sits in my chest and in my gut, that is very hard for me to describe. It's very hard for me. It's getting better to be able to pinpoint what causes it, and why I'm feeling this way. But it's this like this constant fear of nothing and everything at the same time, and it affects me for a very long period of time. I just went through like a bad bout of it over Thanksgiving, and in November, and for the first time in like 15 years, I was able to identify what was causing it, but
Hmm.
it's not as explosive. Where my panic disorder, my experiences whenever I panic, and have panic attacks, are much more explosive. So there's a cause and there's an effect, and it happens quickly. And I go into my panic attacks, which is hyperventilation. Every muscle in my body tightens. It feels like a truck is like crushing my chest.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
a lot of times, because of the heavy breathing, I pass out or throw out from hyperventilation. So it's way more explosive in my experience. I can't speak
Yeah.
to everybody's, but that's how I feel like would be the best way to describe the two.
No, it does make a lot of sense. And obviously, I mean, if you're throwing up and passing out, then it's definitely quite a violent panic attack. Yeah, I mean,
Talk about oversharing, right?
no, no, no. I mean,
Yeah.
no, but I think it's good for people to understand because because I mean, I've had depression, I had a nervous breakdown, and I suffered on top of that with panic attacks. And I think the only way I could describe even depression is that to me, it felt like I knew it was an emotional malaise, the source of it and all kinds of things. But the the only way I could sort of describe the feeling, it's almost like a physical disease. It's like it really does manifest physically.
Oh,
Almost
absolutely.
like when you have a flu or a cold, you have the physical effect, and it's really that the presentation is physical. And I think with the panic attack, one of the thing I was talking to a friend about this as well the other day actually about he was telling me how he had like chest pains and heart pain, and I was asking him to describe it, and he was describing different things, and I was just like, yeah, that in my mind I was like, this is not physical, this is emotional.
Right.
And I said, he had this feeling of like his heart was going to pump out of his chest. And I remember from panic attacks that where my mind was totally fine, and all of a sudden my body would just go, and it felt like
Yes.
I was having a heart attack. It's actually really like it's painful.
Very painful.
I actually went to the A&E. It was just like, this is many, many years ago. It's over 10 years ago now. But I was like, I'm feeling fine. I don't even know what's going on. But I knew I was already like, under treatment at the time. But I was just like, I thought I was fine. And but your body is telling you no. And the anxiety, I think, is like when you said, the sensation you said, is it a bit like a sense of doom, a sense of gloom? Is that how you?
Yes, I always
Mhm.
when I talk to kids, I feel like it's this feeling like you're about to be attacked.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
this unsafe feeling, and the everything you just said about it being taking on a physical disease or disorder. I mean, I spent literally 2 years of my life going to doctors, getting checked out, thinking
Yeah.
I was having heart attacks or MS because I didn't. Again, this lack of awareness of nobody talking about it. I didn't know that it could mentally, like for struggling mentally, could cause something physically. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
definitely this intense, irrational fear that you are in danger. That's what your body's reacting that way.
Yeah, and I think it's so good to point it out. I'm glad you talk about this because, you know, like actually that same person I was talking to the other day, this man who was telling me about, this, he basically, when I said to him, is it's like a sense of doom? He was like, yeah, that's what I feel. I got this
Exactly.
crushing pain. I said, it's like a hand holding it, squeezing it. He was like, yeah. So I think the thing is like, because I said, emotions live in your body, and he was like, well, no, but I'm fine. I'm like, I don't have issues. I was like, what do you mean by emotions in your body? Like, I was like, well, when some people are stressed, they can get like tummy aches. Other people have, really tense shoulders, they're always like tense in the shoulders. That's, stress. He was like, oh, yeah, yeah, of course. I was like, that's what I mean by emotions living in your body. And he was like, oh,
Right.
okay. Right.
Right.
A lot of people think it's all the woo woo and it's not right, but actually it's really just super simple.
Exactly.
It's super logical, actually,
It's very logical. It's
Yeah.
actually like very medical. It's very scientific whenever you talk about it. But a lot of times when we describe mental health, I see people start thinking like, oh, she's, talking about that hippy dippy stuff.
Mm,
And really, everybody experiences it. So it's just different levels, right? So
yes.
my husband experiences stress. I just experience stress in a way more all consuming way.
Yes. Yes.
Everybody can
Yeah.
kind of identify what it feels like, whether someone's is more magnified or not.
Yeah. And it can be really debilitating, just like if someone has a physical disease, it's really is, I mean, panic attacks or, I mean, they're frightening.
Yes.
They can be really, really frightening. So I want to move on to the isolation piece
Okay.
because obviously isolation is obviously a big piece around mental health with the stigma, and isolation kind of makes it worse, because if you're not reaching out to people like him, he doesn't even know what's going on with him. Like he doesn't realize
Sure.
it's actually an emotional thing. He keeps going to the doctors, like you were saying for yourself as well. And he doesn't realize actually, they say he's got nothing wrong. He's done
Right.
all the tests. So, but I think isolation and not hearing about all this stuff is a big factor into keeping people into an unhealthy mental state. They're not getting help, and they don't know how to handle it. They're not going to learn how to manage it. So how does isolation happen?
Oh, geez. It's so forever. It'll just be such a heartbreaking topic for me.
Mm,
I think that, and I've said this many times over the years, that I think the most difficult side effect of battling with these issues is the loneliness that comes along with it. And
yes.
even thinking back to like different experiences that I had, that I was surrounded by people that would do anything for me. I always feel like I've mentioned that, being met with good intentions, but people not understanding me.
Mm,
And you feel like you are trapped in your own body and you can't escape your own mind, but that nobody else in the world could possibly understand what you're going through.
yes.
So you don't even, when you're in that isolated state, you don't even think you aren't getting help. You think that you, no one could possibly relate to what you're going through. And it really wasn't until I started Listen Lucy that I realized how isolated I truly felt, because I started Listen Lucy to help others, obviously, and to share what I had learned. But I had never really spent any time communicating with other people that battled the same things that I battled. So once I started doing that through Listen Lucy, and hearing all these stories, it made me feel a part of this community of people that really got it, that got the kind of person that I was. And isolation happens for all different reasons. When your mind, for me, right, when I'm in this almost like a manic state, my mind is going so fast and constant that I can't think about anything other than what I'm experiencing. So I can't think about, I need to talk about this with my husband. I need to talk about this with this person. And even now, being way more educated in my illness, it still happens to me. But when I was 17, 18, 19 years old, I didn't even know it was a thing. So
Mm-hmm.
the ignorance, along with the physical things and the mental things that are happening, cause you to kind of turn inward, because you don't even know how to explain it. I didn't even know
Yeah.
how to explain to
Mm-hmm.
anybody that this is how I was feeling. I didn't have the tools or the words to properly communicate it. So it forced me into isolation, I feel like.
Yes, and yes, absolutely, and I think also is the awareness. I mean, if you don't mind, I'd like to explain maybe like how I experienced it.
Sure.
Yeah. So when this is like over 10 years ago now. So 10 years ago, like when it started, when it happened to me, it sort of spiraled down over several months. I wasn't even aware I was depressed. I
Sure.
just thought I was like, I just didn't want to get out of bed. I just wasn't hungry. And I was isolating myself little by little. I would cancel plans. I wouldn't commit. People were starting to get really pissed off with me because I was flaky. The only thing I
Yes.
could commit to was going to work. Till this day, I still don't even know how I did that, actually, going to work Monday to Friday. But it was just like survival mode. I was just like going to work. And I just, and I was just little by little isolating myself. And then it started to get worse and worse. And I think that's part of maybe also that's one part of the isolation, like you mentioned, the awareness and not having the words. And I think the other part of me was this, once I realized like the shit had hit the fan, and I was like, it was
Right.
almost like I'd gone so far in. Um, there was this part of me that's always been very private, which is now is obviously ironic because now I have this podcast and I'm really opening up, but it's like I was very private and I felt really ashamed and I didn't want people to look at me a certain way.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and this thing that you just touched on earlier, and I want to dive into this, is I read on your website about sympathy versus empathy and your anger at being looked at with sad eyes but good intentions. I love
Yes.
that because that really resonated. So I want to ask you, like, to you, because that's what will stop me reaching out to people. So to you, like, what is the difference between sympathy and empathy, and how does it look like in real life?
I think it's such a good question. I think that I am very, very lucky to have the support system that I have. I have a beautiful, very close family. I had friends that became my family when my family couldn't be there for me. My husband has been with me since we were just 17 years old. Didn't go running for the hills, but that doesn't mean they understand, right?
Yeah.
They're very sorry for what I'm going through when it's happening, but they've never experienced it themselves.
Hmm.
And it's almost like you're speaking a different language. And when you find someone that can be empathetic to your situation, and when you connect with that person on an emotional level of that empathy, right? It's like you're speaking the same language, as the way I think I can put it. Like sometimes I feel like still that I'm an alien, right? That that I was like
Yeah.
dropped here in this world, and that no one else gets it. And when you find someone that gets it, um, it oh my God, it's such a connection. Is so liberating to be able to speak freely, because I feel like no one means to be sympathetic over empathetic, but sometimes that's all people have to offer, right? I mean, my
Is
mom,
sympathy pity? Like,
I
how
would
do you?
I would I would say that sympathy is more pity, but I think it's more just being sorry for the person that's going through something, right?
Yeah.
All they can express is I'm so sorry, right? That we always use the example as like when someone passes away, sympathy is saying like, I'm so sorry for your loss. Let me bring you a casserole, right? Brene Brown talks about that all the time. And that's wonderful, right? It's
Mm,
so kind and it's what my support system could offer me, but it wasn't enough to help me out of that isolation. Does that make sense?
yeah.
And so one of the situations I was thinking of is that I kind of when the shit hit the fan for me, I had a panic attack on my college campus, and I ran out of class. I didn't know where to go. Found myself in our health center. They called 911. They called the ambulance to come and get me. And they kind of like, no one knew what to do with me at that point. They like kind of shoved me in this small room. I'm surrounded by my husband, who was my boyfriend at the time. He had called my mom to drive up because they were taking me to the hospital. And I had this stress ball in my hand and all these people surrounding me. So I was being so supportive, but nobody was saying to me, like, it's okay that you feel this way.
Yeah.
And I remember being so alone and so angry in that moment that it's something that has stuck with me for over 10 years.
Because you felt like the freak in that moment? Is that what you
Oh,
mean?
for
Mm,
sure.
mm.
I mean, Angie, I have felt like the freak in so many situations, but
Yeah,
that
yeah.
one was so dramatic, for a lack of better terms. I exploded, like I broke the stress ball. I had like stress ball guts all over me. I looked like I had just stuck my finger in a socket. I mean,
Yeah,
it
yeah.
and
Yeah,
and,
yeah.
and I was
I'm
being met.
laughing because I get it, don't worry. I get
No, no, no.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
I'd explain it.
yeah.
I totally,
Mm.
I was being met with so much sympathy. They wanted to help me, but they didn't know the words to connect with me. They weren't able to emotionally put themselves in my situation. And I spent a long time being so angry at sympathy versus empathy. And now I'm trying to learn like that sometimes that's all people have to offer.
What would have been empathy in that moment? Like, what would, so for other people, so I think that's the thing is people don't always know how to be around us when we like this. So what would empathy look like?
I think empathy in those situations are saying, trying to relate and saying, I know how you feel, right? It's okay that you're feeling this way. This is going to pass. Things that I need to hear, and someone saying like, Jordan, this really got to me. Like our conversation right now is very empathetic because we're able to pull on each other's experiences. We have
Mm.
different diagnoses, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Everyone can relate to being stressed. So I think attempting to put yourself in that person's shoes causes you to have a more empathetic tone and to say, like, I know you're feeling stress. I know what stress is like. It's going to be okay. I know how you're feeling. I've been there myself. And I think it kind of levels us and not makes you feel like such a freak.
Yeah, and actually, a few things that you said, I want to dive into. You said some like so many good things. Yeah, there's one thing that I'll never forget, and it actually made me angry. Something I found out in hindsight was, I think about, it must have been about a year or two after the breakdown, and by that time I'd gone, I was much better, and I was going to therapy and stuff like that, but I still have, it'll go in waves. But I'd been so open to a friend of mine here, and I thought we had like it could be also it's I'm sure it's definitely, I'm also at fault here, but I used to be quite open to her, and she would always ask, are you okay, and blah blah blah, and but what she never told me, she told me this like maybe a year later. She was like, oh, that she sort of in passing said that, she'd also been, she'd experienced something similar. And I guess I'm not telling this story right, but basically, what I remember is that when I was sharing a lot with her, I would feel that she felt a bit sorry for me. I'd be like you were saying, and every time she's like, oh no, how are you? Are you okay? I'd always feel that thing in the background. She'd almost assume something was wrong.
Yes.
And if I'd ever said to her, oh, if I said text her, oh, I'm not so good, she goes, oh, I knew it. Oh, do you want to talk? And I'm like, there was something about it I used to just, annoy me. And what then sort of the bit that sort of like made me, I guess like angry in later on was that she basically, I guess her demeanor in a way made me feel like I was a freak, and that she had everything under control, or, or most things or whatever.
Right.
But actually, it would have helped me had she also opened up. And I know this sounds super
Right.
needy and is very petty, but there is something about I learned about the experience is that if someone, like, I don't go around talk about it either. I mean, I don't go around talking about it, but if someone comes to me and tells me, they suffer from anxiety, they're on medication, I'll straight away open up about me too, because it puts you on a, I'm not there pretending to be above you, because that's how it feels like when you're opening up about something so sensitive and the other person's experienced it but is holding it back. It's a weird vibe.
Oh, without a doubt. And I think
Mm.
too that that doesn't sound needy or petty. It's that it doesn't. It sounds like that want for empathy, right? You want,
Mm.
and I think too, when you struggle, I struggle with this all the time, and I don't know if you do too, but now because I do live my life and so open about my battle with mental illness, anytime I experience a human emotion, I feel
Mm.
like everyone gets on their hind legs like, oh no. And sometimes I'm like, well, I'm still just a human being, so having a bad day doesn't mean I'm going to end up in the hospital anymore.
Right, exactly.
So I think sometimes when you are in crisis and then when you move out of crisis, it takes time for everybody to adjust, and that can be, it can feel almost insulting. Um
Mm.
and because you feel like, and then sometimes people just don't have good intentions, right? Sometimes people like thrive off of what feels like a failure to you. So
Yeah.
I think there's so much to unpack there, because I've had many relationships like that where I've had that I felt judged before I even say anything.
Hmm.
And other situations where I misinterpreted their concern, that I was saying, well, I'm just angry. It's not the end of the world. And their concern is just to make sure that, my well-being is their concern. But I don't think anything you just said was petty or needy. I think that that's the complete explanation of what we're looking for and how important empathy is in those situations.
Yeah, but yeah, it's so because I didn't actually plan on talking about this bit here that I'm about to ask you your opinion on.
Great.
is um is when I see those, it's always trendy when someone just committed suicide, like a celebrity. So the last couple of years, there'd been a few celebrity committing suicide, and all of a sudden you see all these video online going, oh, they're always models as well. Like, if you feel depressed,
Mhm.
if you have not that models don't have mental health, but it's just so unrelatable.
Right.
They're like, if they basically talk about someone who's having depression or committing suicide, basically, and they're making this like really glossy video around it, and they say, if you feel this way, reach out, and I'm like, you don't fucking get it. That's the whole point. Like, we don't
Right.
reach out. That's the problem, because one, you're putting those stupid videos out, but two, like, you know, this, I feel those videos are definitely made by people who have no idea about mental health, because the number one thing that's the hardest is isolation. Like, you talk about isolation a lot on your website, and it's a big issue because there is this stigma, and because we don't know how we're gonna be greeted when we reach out to people.
Absolutely. I think that I there have been a few celebrities that have died by suicide that
Mm,
have really not strangely, I just don't know a better word to use, but have strangely impacted me in a deep way. One
mm.
of those being Kate Spade.
Yeah.
Um,
Mhm.
she is my favorite designer. I love her brand, and whenever I found out that she died by suicide, it really kind of like sent me into a whirlwind.
Yeah.
And I think that and Anthony Bourdain died by suicide I think it was only a week later, if I
Yeah, it was
remember.
around the same time, yeah.
It was around the same time,
Mhm.
and then the world reacts, right?
Yes,
And
yes.
I mean, that's with anything. And I think the issue with those, the issue with those kind of campaigns, it's fleeting. It sometimes the media jumps on an opportunity, right? But then there's no backup effort, right? A
Mhm.
video is
Yeah.
just a video. I mean, if it helped one person reach out, then that was worth it for
Of
sure.
course, of course. Mhm.
And the more we talk about it, the better it is. But I don't agree with waiting until a crisis of a celebrity happens or the passing of a celebrity happens for the media to take attention to what this conversation is, because the truth is that in the US suicide rates are rising. Suicide is now the second leading cause of death in kids under the age of 18.
Oh my
And
god. Mm.
we those are everyday people that need our attention. there are so many factors when it comes to suicide prevention. And honestly, from what I've found in my work with Listen Lucy, is that people just still are not comfortable talking about suicide, about self-harm,
Yeah.
about these issues that are still very taboo, and they're afraid of it. And I understand the fear. I do.
Yeah. Yeah.
I I I think that sometimes the media jumps on something and creates something fleeting instead of helping give attention to organizations like mine and other ones that
Yeah.
are doing the work every single day to try to bring attention to these things to help, hopefully even just a smidge, bring down those numbers.
I mean, can I offer you how I would like those videos to be different?
Sure.
Like this would be my solution, because actually that's what helped me, is to basically to depict also, I don't know what's the word in English, but to basically explains the different signs that, if you have a friend or family member and you've seen this and this and this and this happening, just list it out, reach out to them. Because
Yes.
what saved me back then when I was going through completely, I just didn't know what was going on with me. A friend of mine, it was actually a guy, picked up on it because I kept like canceling it, and then I literally did not know how I was going to feel in 2 hours time, because it was like, oh, we can postpone it, because I was basically canceling. I said, oh, I'm too tired to
Hmm.
meet up. It was on the weekend, and he said, well, we can do it later. How about 2 p.m.? And I literally, instead of doing the usual I was doing for months, I was like, oh, I can't, and just no explanation. Just like, I don't know. I don't even remember what I used to say, but I never used to say exactly how I felt. In that moment, all I said was, I have no idea how I'm going to feel in 2 hours. Can we just another day, please? And
Yeah.
he went, I'm coming. He lived on the other side of London. So it was like over 2 hours commute. And I didn't think he was gonna. I was just like, oh, whatever. I was still in bed.
Right. Right.
When he came, I was still in bed. I hadn't showered in I don't know how long. And I was living with housemates, and who didn't know. They were just always complaining because I was always in my room. So they were giving me a hard time over that. And I was like, oh. And so he came over and he was like, and I was explaining to him, what's been happening. And he was like, he said something that really, that actually, that's what's one, that he came over is what saved me. Like he picked up
Yes.
on it. So he's obviously highly sensitive to it. Two, he said this one thing that has become my mantra in my mind. He said, when you go through something like this, you don't have to do this alone. You can call me. You can call Emily. So Emily is another friend that he knew who also struggled with depression and
Yes.
stuff like that. And I literally went, ah, it was a new concept to me. I had never even thought that was a possibility. It was a new concept. And a week later, I had a really bad panic attack, and it happened in actually grocery shopping in Lidl. And
Perfect.
yeah, always, in public. And
Yes.
yeah, and so I mean, not always, but like
Right.
that was a major one, and I had to like run home. I never went that fast. And
I've been there. Yep.
yeah, and so I called her up because I remembered in my mind that he said call her, oh, call me. I was like, okay, well, he'd already looked after me the previous weekend. And so I called her up, and and I remember I was like, hey, she's like, are you okay?
Right.
And I was like, and she knew immediately what was going on.
No.
Yeah. She was like, do you want me to come over? I was like, uh-huh. She's like, I'm
Yeah.
going to have a bath. I'm like, no, come now.
Right.
So
And how great it was to be able to identify those people that you could trust.
yeah,
And,
yeah. And this is why I find those videos. I mean, they may work for some, and if they do, great. But I think,
wonderful, of
that's
course.
wonderful. But I think there's a big chunk of people who, like me, did not know it was an option to reach out. And this is why maybe just to do the reverse and say, these are the signs, because people don't always know. They may think that you're rude. They may think you don't care. They may think you're flaky and cold. They may think that you're just always moody. They have no idea that you're just trying to keep it you're trying to keep it in, you're trying to keep it down, and you don't want to be a burden on anyone
Oh, for
else.
sure. And it has given me some horrible days. I mean, the worst days of my life. But it also plays a huge part in the person that I am and the person that he loves. So I think having some confidence about it, but also deciding when you're ready to broach the subject. It's not something to be embarrassed about. And if that
Mm.
person is wanting to judge you, they're not your person anyway.
Yeah, and I think, yeah, I love that. And I think also it's in how you talk about it, right? And I think also too is, for example, with you actually you owning up to it, you're taking responsibility with it, you're actually helping other people with it. You've sought help, you are managing it, which is a very different proposition to your partner than if you said, well, I suffer from this, but I'm not dealing with it. Right? That's two very different, right? So I think it's
Oh, for sure. But we live that, right? I mean, my husband
mm,
was with me whenever I wasn't getting help. And actually he's the person that got through to me when I was for 2 years, I was refusing help. And then when it got very out of control in college, he's the one that said to me, you know, Jordan, at this point, you're choosing to live like this. And
wow. Yeah.
yeah, and it was,
Yeah,
I
it's
mean,
good.
right. And it really hit home with me. So we went through that very dramatic stage at a very young part of our lives together. And he still was very patient with me. And I think that's all he had to do. He's never offered me solutions. He's never tried to change me. When things are bad, he just sits next to me and waits them out. And I think that's the best partner for me when it comes to my mental illness, because I need to figure it out, but I need someone that isn't judging me because of it. And
Yeah.
we have been through, we may not have dated a lot of people, but we have tons of real life experience
Yeah.
as a couple. So I think that not being in a place to confidently talk about it is okay, but that's really what you need to be focusing on is what life do you want and how do you get that. You
Yeah.
need to be putting yourself as a priority and figuring that out, and that it's okay that you aren't okay yet.
Yeah, and I think I like that, you say like, he's just there. He's not trying to give you solution or change that. I think for me, like there'll be like in my mind, I have like like really simple clear instructions. Let's say if I should have like, because now I'm good, I feel well, but we all have the ups, ups and downs, and it comes in waves and whatnot. But so in my mind, like from my experience, because when I've had to learn to take care of myself when it happens, to learn to see the signs, and sometimes it also happens and I didn't see the signs change, is that like I would just say, for example, to a partner, let's say if I live with a partner, just make sure I don't stay up late. I have to go to bed. Just give me loads of salads. Make sure I don't drink
Yeah.
alcohol. Just simple things that I can do, sort of like can help. I guess like it'll give them a way of like, because I know that would be helpful to me, because if I start drinking loads, like it's just not going to help
Right.
situation,
Well,
right?
I
So
think too, it's such a good point, Angie. When I just had my child in the summer, and to prepare for it, I was so afraid of, and still always am going to be, of postpartum depression.
yeah,
And the crisis plan, I actually did just that, what you explained, and I wrote out a crisis plan and shared it with my husband of what to do, and that included like make sure I shower, make sure I'm eating
mm,
healthy. Like you have to take, if this is the direction I'm going in, because those things seem so simple if you aren't going through it, but it can literally change the direction of the road you're
yeah.
going.
Oh,
Yeah.
absolutely, absolutely. Everything, yeah. All these little things will help. And shower, I'll even say like make sure that if my hair starts to go greasy, I have to wash them because I won't.
Yes. Showering, I'm telling you, it is so,
Yeah.
and people terrify you when you become a new mom and want to tell you you're never going to shower, you're never going to, I was so afraid of that, because I know if I don't take care of myself and just my self-care of my body, I know what that does to me. And I
Yeah.
mean, my husband says I argue that you showered more when you just had our son. I was showering
Yeah.
like twice a day. I'm not exaggerating. I was showering so much because, again, it's such a simple everyday task that really, truly can impact your mental health.
And it's also a moment that you have just for yourself, I imagine, when you have a
Yes.
baby, because it's intense, obviously. And so, I mean, I don't have a child, but I can only imagine. And when I see my friends around me with kids, it's like, going to the toilet is your me time. Going to the shower is your me time, if you even have time. It's like, yeah. So, I just want to ask you a bit of a cheeky question. When he said to you, after you were resisting for 2 years to get help, and when you guys were still dating,
Yes.
that he said, now you're choosing to live like this. Do you remember what your reaction was? I could imagine that'd be a big fight if someone said that.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
actually, I am such a combative, an argumentative person, but I will tell you that it like stunned me.
Yeah.
That I felt like I felt like this was happening to me. I was viewing it as being such a victim
Yes.
at that time in my life. And I very rarely, honestly, do I get put on my place. And I feel like it kind of put me in my place. And while I was angry in the moment, I feel like it's one of the only times I've been like stunned into silence where I was like, I can't even argue that. Because I was being offered help, and that was the difference. There are so many people that are struggling that don't know what help is out there, don't have support systems, trying to suggest things. And my parents were advocating for me the best way that they could without knowing what I was going through. And as people were suggesting that I start going to therapy, I basically told every single person to fuck off.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So
Mm.
Connor was right. Like I was choosing to refuse treatment.
Yeah.
And it wasn't that I didn't know that there was treatment, and I think that's the difference. There are some people that don't have the support that I have to kind of guide them whenever you don't know how to
Mm.
guide yourself. And so yes, I remember being stunned into silence. And I think probably in 15 years of us being together, that's the only time that that's happened.
Yeah. I don't know if maybe if you'd be open to this and if this is a good time in the interview, because I want to go into how to deal with it. And part of it that you talk about is, challenging negative consuming thoughts and how writing about it helped you. So, in terms of, going into so that it makes sense, people, do you want to maybe just touch on your story, at school,
Sure.
and the situation around that, and then how you then, I guess, moved on to learning how to deal with it and writing about it. And
Sure, absolutely. So when I was 19 and I finally started therapy, one of the biggest things that I struggled with was finding the verbiage and finding the way to adequately describe what I was going through. And what happens with me, which just sounds very ironic since I'm a public speaker, is that when my anxiety gets really bad, my words get jumbled and it's very hard for me to like string sentences along. And it's a very difficult thing to describe. And I've tried every coping technique that's ever been offered to me. But the one that really helped me with that was writing. And what I found in college was when my head was on straight, right? Not in the middle of a panic attack, that wouldn't have worked for me. But when my head was on straight, when I was able to take some time to myself, I would just sit and write. And I would write about what panic attacks felt like. I would write about what was stressing me out, what I was fearing, all of these emotions that I was having a really hard time processing because my brain was moving so fast and the thoughts were just like going in my head. But taking the time to write them out and giving them some attention helped me be able to articulate that to my therapist. So if there were issues that I was struggling with that I couldn't get out verbally, I would write them. And I wrote about everything. And whether I read those to my therapist, to my friends, my family, or my husband, or to nobody at all, it really gave me this ability to start to vocalize something invisible that was happening to me.
mm,
And that's kind of what led me to create this outlet, right? Is to give people and show them how I use writing as a coping technique and to put words to something that there are no words for.
yeah, and it's, I guess, also a way of like expressing yourself in a way that no one can interrupt you. So you can just go to the end of your thoughts.
Without a doubt. That's one of the things I talk about in every school is that sometimes when you're talking with people that love you so much, they want to interrupt and offer you solutions when all you want to do is just finish your thought.
Mhm.
And they're coming from a good place, but you have to find the solution. So you're absolutely right. Having the time to express yourself uninterrupted is everything.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So, what would you advise to someone who, has like these negative thoughts is like haunting them and it's just really consuming and all negative? Would you then advise the first step to write them out, or how would you get them to stop it or manage it?
Well, I think that all I can really offer is how I did it and
Mm,
how I'm doing it and kind of sharing my experience and hopefully something sticks. But I 100% recommend talking to a mental health professional to help you guide through, help you find a guide through all of this, because it is with assistance that I was able to continue to work on this, and I'm still working on it now. And I do that with my therapist. So I think that would be the first step. I think the second step is that journaling is also free, and there are tons of writing prompt books out there to help you that are geared towards exactly what we're talking about. And if not, just getting a notebook and writing out the thoughts that are spinning in your head. And when I'm really anxious, that's how I try to start my work day, is I'll take out a notebook and just get all the thoughts out of my head, and write them out. And I find that to be very beneficial. So that's how I would suggest starting and writing out those negative thoughts. You feel nervous to give them any sort of attention, but for me, putting light on them shows me how ridiculous they are, right?
Yeah. And I think also just to realize that they are not the thoughts that you're thinking are not the truth and they're not you. So, because we all condition, I mean, that's a whole other, I guess, that would be a whole other episode,
Yeah.
because we could go into it, for quite a while. But I guess like what I like to say to people is that, I mean, there's a few exercises to do around that to become aware of thoughts that just keep coming into your head, into your mind. And they're just, a lot of us, we are unconscious to the same repetitive thoughts that we keep having. We keep thinking about a scenario or whatever it is that we have in our mind. And it's to realize that that thought effectively, because it's not, you can't put your hand on it, you can't hold it. It came
Mhm.
from nowhere, and you can put it into, it's hard to explain, but in my mind, I go, okay, this came from nowhere and it's going nowhere. So I sort of almost like picture it arriving from, nowhere, and I'm putting it back out into nothing. Maybe not when it's like, a panic attack or things like that, but like it'll be little things in everyday life. And that's when you practice, it could be things like, let's say you think someone maybe intended to say something mean, or they may be intended to hurt you, or they're doing something on purpose, or they're being, malicious, for example, but it's all in your head. You're just being triggered. And it's important to sort of make a separation sometimes with like, stupid thoughts in your head, and just to go, okay, do you know what? That came from nowhere. That's just stupid. And then I just put it somewhere.
Yeah.
It's, I'm not
Yes.
explaining it well, but
No, you are. You really
yeah.
are. You're
Oh,
explaining
okay.
it very
Okay.
well. Yes. And for me, like I always express it as like when my anxiety's bad, the mental illness side of me starts lying to me. And the big thing, the repetitive thought I have in my head whenever I'm not doing well is I'm a failure. I'm a failure. I'm a failure. And
Mm,
what I did was write out my and I actually, it's very interesting we're talking about this because I just talked about this in therapy this week, but I have a running list of Listen Lucy's accomplishments over the past 7 years for this specific reason. Is that
yes. Yes.
start telling myself I'm a failure, but now, which I've never done before, is that I want to write out a list of my personal accomplishments as well. Because I think that visually does it for me, of being like, okay, I'm telling myself I'm a failure, but here's all these pages of things that I've accomplished. So clearly that's not true.
Yeah.
You know, to be
Yeah.
able to challenge the thought that way. And then the goal is, right, is that when the thought eventually pops in your head that you think right after that thought, that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
You
No,
know?
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
But writing helps me right with that right now.
And I think that would even, that's actually, like you said, like listing out all your accomplishments is actually something that even if someone doesn't suffer from mental health, that actually even suggests, like that was actually part of I did like a New Year's episode with a guest. And that was one of the things that I was telling people is that, if you're not sure that you've achieved anything, if you're feeling bad about the new year, you feel you've had a bad year and you just don't know, you're not hopeful for the future, whatnot. Is to actually just look back and list out all the things that you've really think about the things that you've actually achieved, because in one year you've definitely achieved something. There'll be
Yes.
something you've been proud of, and it doesn't matter which area of your life. And I think, like you said, like if you list out those things when you feel like you are an imposter or fraud, or you're not doing, or you're a failure, all these like, negative thoughts, is to actually go back and look, do you know what? I'm the one who got myself to these accomplishments. That means that I still have it to do the next accomplishments,
Oh,
because
absolutely.
yeah.
Even if that accomplishment is that you're still here, that's
Yeah. Oh
that's
my,
a huge
yeah.
accomplishment. If it's getting out of bed, or if it's whatever, being featured in Forbes magazine, whatever it is, it doesn't matter what the accomplishment is, but you have to acknowledge those accomplishments, because you can easily get wrapped up in things that aren't going your way.
Yeah. And I think those are great tools like for because therapy is not always accessible to everyone. It could be, based where they are
Right.
geographically or financially, depending on which country they live. Some places is part of national health, other places you have to pay money. It's just very different. So I think having those little things that you can do, whether it's like journaling, look back at accomplishments and understanding that your thoughts are just thoughts. They're like, I picture
Oh,
them,
yeah.
they're like little gremlins. They're just there on your shoulder, like a little gremlin.
Sure.
And that's it. You just don't feed them.
Yeah, absolutely, and there's a million, coping techniques that aren't
Mm,
therapy because in the States, we have to pay a copay, and it's very expensive. If you don't have insurance, it's obviously even more expensive, but, working out, going for a run, eating healthy, meditation apps on your phone. There are a ton of free meditation apps. There are so many different coping techniques that won't hurt you
yeah,
financially,
exactly.
geographically. That definitely, I'm so glad that you brought that up because that's a major thing because I think it intimidates people if they feel like they can't afford therapy, which I totally get for sure.
Yeah. And also like, even like going to bed earlier,
Oh, for sure.
things like that,
Sleep is so important.
yeah, it does. It's really healing, to dream and stuff. So no, these are great tips. Thank you for that,
Oh,
Jordan.
sure.
I want to ask you because obviously, like on your website, Listen Lucy, people go in and they submit anonymously their stories. That you also have people when you go to schools and university and different places. When you go up and talk, people come to you and they share their stories. And so, I have a question around that: Is have you found, like in your experience, a common thread to all of us who struggle with whether it's anxiety, panic attack, and depression? You can say highly intelligent, but because I believe ignorance is bliss.
They're super funny, very smart, unbelievably good looking. You know what I think is so interesting about mental health and the battle with mental illness is it impacts everybody, every age, every gender, every ethnicity, every race, religion, whatever it is. It's really there isn't a common thread in terms of this is the type of person mental illness finds. The thread is that everybody is human and is susceptible to this. There are people that are older, people that are younger that have written to me that have experienced the same things but brought on by different things.
Mm.
And I think the statistic we use is 1 in 4 people in the United States has a diagnosable mental illness, but 4 in 4 people have mental health. So everybody needs to be talking about it. You don't have to have a diagnosis.
Can
And
you explain that a little bit? So when you say so in the US, 1 in 4 people has a diagnosed mental health issue. So those are the people who've been diagnosed. So that means that more people could be struggling with it, right?
yeah, actually, it includes people that may not be seeking treatment currently.
Okay.
So yes,
Also, you said diagnosable. So if they
yeah,
went in to get help, they'd be diagnosed.
yes,
Okay, I
and
hear you.
1 in 4, and that includes we include substance use disorders and addiction in that
Yes.
under that umbrella, but also that 4 in 4 people have mental health. So everybody needs to be talking about this.
Oh yeah, like you mean everybody has an emotional landscape,
Well,
and
sure, just like
yes,
everyone has physical health, right? Every single
exactly.
person needs to take care of themselves physically. Everyone needs to be taking care of themselves mentally. And there needs to be that shift in the conversation. But with my writers, I don't think there's a common thread or common walk of life. I think that it really shows that this impacts everybody, regardless of how much money you have or don't have, or what god you may worship, or what race you are. And I think that that's kind of such an important thing because it shows that everybody really needs to care about it.
Yes. Oh yeah. Yes, absolutely. I guess I was just wondering if maybe, like for example, Marissa Peer, she talks about, a lot of the people she comes across is that they don't feel that they're enough, or they're afraid of taking too much space. And I wonder if maybe that was part of like, maybe as that kind of voice you kept hearing maybe with everyone you're coming across. So is that
I think the isolation is a common thread or a common theme of feeling alone in their struggle.
yeah.
the people that come to my website are looking for someone to listen to them, and hopefully they know they're going to be unconditionally supported. But I think that it's a loneliness that I see in the tone of the pieces.
Yeah.
um I
Yeah, loneliness is, yeah, is really hard. Now, no, we didn't touch on this, but I mean, I would definitely, if anyone was interested to read the story, like, like there's the whole story around, how you were bullied, and I mean, it's honestly, I applaud you how you handled it and came through it, but it's, it was quite horrific. But I was just have a question. So the bullies that you had in at school, did you ever face those later in life? Have you ever
uh
met them, bumped into them, or?
I have bumped into them, yes. One of them was on my plane home from my trip.
Oh, this trip now?
Yeah, yeah, on Monday. But I live in the area. I ended up living in the area that I grew up in, which is shocking to me still. But
Yeah, that's brave. I mean, yeah.
yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. But I have run into them, and I have never had any closure with them. I've never acknowledged them, nor they acknowledge me. And I really, truly don't care for any sort of acknowledgement.
No,
I
yeah.
feel like I get asked that question a lot, like if they ever apologize, and I don't want an apology. I hope that they have turned into great adults that would never treat anybody that way. I chalk it up to being idiot kids. But I also think, like I was saying, whenever I saw one of them recently when we saw them at the airport, like how uncomfortable if they know what I do for a living.
Yeah.
That's the beauty of it.
Mhm.
So, but I feel like in the end I won, so it's fine.
Oh, you absolutely, yeah, but you're like a phoenix, you've risen from it, and you've definitely turned it around. It's like, I mean, I don't want to be one of those people that says silver lining and all, but
Yeah.
but I think, I mean, two things is, one is, I'm always curious to whether bullies even understand that they were bullies. I think some people don't realize it. And
Right.
I think some people do learn their persecuting behavior because they were persecuted themselves. I mean, we see it all the time, even, for example, even a very different topic, but for example, with racism, sometimes it becomes inverse racism because it's part of human nature. We act
Yeah.
out what we've experienced, and it's almost like we have to go through that to then transcend it and then we get into a better place. And I think so that bit I've been wondering. But two, someone else that, she's quite open about it. She's a very public person, someone called Layla Martin. She is, I don't know how, actually I don't even know what her job title is, but she's a sex educator. She talks about tantrum and the JDEG and all of that. And she was sexually abused as a kid by her dad. And so, but she's transformed it, and she talks about it, openly. So I'm not divulging anything. But we're not friends. We don't know each other, like, personally.
Right. Right. I'm
And
getting it. No
yeah,
worries. Yeah.
I found out about it because, she's public about it. And so, but she's transformed it into helping others through traumas. She's helping others she's become empowered herself in her sexuality and helping other women and men being empowered in their sexuality and how to deal with stuff like that. And so, like, she's someone who's also risen from the ashes, basically. Something that was, obviously, I never wish anything so cruel to ever happen to anyone, but it's an amazing testimony to human nature when people like her and yourself, like, for example, around bullying and mental health, can turn it around and utilize it as something to help others to going through what you went through. And so I really, really applaud you. I think it's wonderful because that
You.
cannot have been more scary while still living in the same town.
Yeah, it's a little odd of a career choice. Layla Martin sounds incredibly inspirational, and
Yeah, yeah.
linked under the same umbrella of her isn't. It sounds like I am very, very honored to be linked under that with her. Can't imagine the strength it takes for her to do what she does. I think for me, it it is weird at some points in my life, and I do get myself in like a little bit of strange situations. But I also think what's important is that I truly don't think, like how you had mentioned before, I don't think they knew how much they were traumatizing me. I
No.
don't think, I hope that nobody was trying to put me in years of therapy after I graduated from high school. So I think being able to explain that to younger kids now is so important, that the words you're using may land okay with your sibling, but the girl you're sitting next to in class may really negatively impact her, and that we need to be very careful, and that we need to care and have concern for each other, because you don't know what the other person is going through. And I think that's kind of where I hope the message is going. And I'm happy to share. I still do get emotional sometimes about certain situations that I share that happened to me in that year, but I'm happy to share, because I think kids don't understand how much power they really do have, and that
Mm.
hopefully sharing these very raw experiences help them understand how someone could be now 32 years old and still talking about it, and that you don't want to be the cause of that.
But that's the thing. I think with, like you said, they don't realize. I think because kids are super cruel. They say because they're supposed to, because they haven't learned about empathy. And teenagers, I mean, I remember myself as a teen. We're fucking crazy as teenagers, and we don't.
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing. We don't know until it's happening to us, and that's how we evolve as human being and evolve our emotional intelligence. Because until then, oh my god, I mean, we can be such horrible people
Right.
until we understand, I mean, I was very lucky that my mom always taught me about empathy and being in other people's shoes, and she was always very good like that. So she taught me all of these things, and that's part of my toolbox. But even then, until I knew better, I could be, terrible.
Of
And I
course, you're
think,
still a
yeah.
kid. You do dumb things, and I'm
Mm,
very open about that too. I didn't always act right. I didn't always treat people kindly. I reacted to bad things when I got pushed, I pushed back.
yeah,
And there are things I regret in how I acted too. And I think that's the whole point of the conversation, right? It's
yeah,
not for me to get revenge on them. I mean, it is funny to think about them. It is funny. But I think the whole point is that we just all need to be considerate of each other and treat each other kindly. You don't want to ever be the reason
yeah,
that somebody doesn't want to go to school. And if you are feeling like you don't want to go to school, it doesn't, because of other people, it does not make you weak if you speak up about it. It does not, it takes incredible strength to stand up for yourself. So
yeah.
I want kids to understand that, and to know that eventually you will be laughing about it, and that you just have to hang on. It's just a temporary situation.
Yeah, and it definitely doesn't feel like revenge, by the way. What you're
No.
doing, it's definitely transcending. And if you don't mind, I'd love to read out three quotes from that I took from your website,
Sure.
and two of them are written by you, and another one is unknown, but it's from one of an article that you wrote. And so one of the quote is, "That's the thing with mental illness." Sorry,
You're okay.
so when it's not my words, I always find it hard to read out.
That's
Okay,
all right.
so that's the thing with mental illness. As your life changes, so does the illness, and you have to adapt. Another quote that you wrote is, oh, okay. So I'm taking it out completely out of context, but
That's okay.
so the quote is, "It doesn't make me a bad parent," and that's basically you talking about, dealing with, anxiety and panic disorder during your pregnancy, and just to realize, I think it was that just because you have this is not going to make you a bad parent, and I really love that because I think parents, they're always ridden with guilt and worry for their child. And I think an amazing difference with you, and I think I touched on that earlier, is that you're working on it. You're open about it, you're working on it. And I think that's why it's so important to the work that you do because, suffering from mental illness is very hard. But living with someone who doesn't deal with it, it's you helping other people by helping yourself. You know what I'm saying?
Without a doubt. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. You have to definitely. So I think it's important to spread out the word and to let people know that it's okay to put yourself first in that moment, because that's how you're going to be even a better person. I mean, better person is probably the wrong word, but like, yeah, I
No,
guess, yeah,
you're
like,
your
yeah,
best version of yourself for sure.
yeah. And and then I love this one too. So this is one that is from an unknown, and it says, "My anxiety tried to bury me. It didn't know it would." I can't say. Wait a
You're
minute.
okay. I
Okay.
know it. Yeah.
Yeah. So my anxiety tried to bury me. It didn't know I was a seed.
Yeah.
That's wonderful.
Right. I mean, I wish I wrote that. I wish.
Same.
It's always cool to hear yourself being quoted anyway. I'm like, oh shit, what you gonna say that I said? But I really appreciate you looking into those because especially the two you pulled from me that I wrote there. I write about things that I'm currently going through. So my fear of becoming a parent and screwing up my child simply because of my genetic makeup is something that I started going to therapy for before I was even pregnant.
Yes.
Um,
Mhm.
and something I take very seriously. Probably I've had more progress and evolution in the past year and 7 months or 9 months of being pregnant and 7 months of being a parent because I take so seriously how I now am impacting an innocent child that is my child.
Mm.
So pulling those quotes really means a lot to me. And then the seed one, my anxiety has been such a difficult road and managing that. And I get pissed off and I get sick of it and I get tired of having to work at it every single day. But it really has given me my purpose in life. And I've created something that I'm so proud of and that I think is so beautiful and that will hopefully outlive me. And
Mm.
without experiencing the trauma that I have experienced, I wouldn't be running Listen Lucy. So I really do feel like that statement like embodies what has happened with me and my journey.
Yeah. And I think when, like I think when we felt so disempowered by any mental health conditions, there is this pull calling us, I think, to empower others, whichever way it is. And I think that is definitely part of, to me, what I hear what you were doing with Listen Lucy. And
Yes.
to me, what I'm trying to do with this podcast and also with my health coaching, it's all about empowering. If I can empower other people, that's it. That I don't need to, that's if I could just do that, I'm good. You know what I that's like it's so important to
Absolutely.
me. Yeah. Because once you felt that disempowerment and you can see it in others, that the only thing you want to do is help others being empowered, how you've managed to re-empower yourself. And it's yeah,
And
it's
what you're doing, Angie, the way you're doing it gives people like you sharing and being so open, it gives people permission to do the same. And that is how we end stigma around these topics, right? I mean,
yeah, yeah. I hope so because actually
yeah.
the friend I met yesterday, she was one of the things, she was triggered by the social media accounts. And she was like, why are people talking about their private lives all over social media? It's disgusting. And I was just like, oh, don't listen to the podcast.
Yeah.
She was so triggered. I was like, I'll wait, till she's calmed down.
Yeah. Maybe don't tell her about Listen Lucy. Oof.
Yeah, yeah. I think so yeah, I don't know. She's just going through a phase, I think I can tell like she's suffering and I get it. And and she's an amazing friend, which is what I don't even mind her saying it. I'm just like, I'm just
Right.
let her have it out. But I was just thinking to myself, like yesterday and today, for this episode, I was like, I need to completely block that out because I believe in what I'm doing. I believe in what you're doing. And this is something I really enjoy. So I don't want to be listening to that kind of naysaying. I think if it's helpful, it's helpful. I hope so.
Absolutely.
Anyway.
And what you're doing is helpful. I hope this episode's helpful for people, but what you're doing in general is extremely helpful. And when we own it, right? When we own what we have gone through and share it publicly, we take away that isolating feeling to people because they see that they are not alone in this
Mm,
battle, even if you feel it. And
yes.
that's what you're doing.
Yes. Absolutely. Absolutely. I could talk to you for hours. I mean, yeah, it is true. I think that's part of how I knew. I mean, yeah, I think definitely. Yeah. Yes. No, I totally agree. What's the biggest insight you've had from your journey before Listen Lucy to now? And in my mind, I was like, maybe it's the isolation part, but I guess maybe I'm just assuming.
Oh man, I feel like there is just so much insight that I wish I could tell my 18-year-old self.
Yeah.
Um, I think the number one thing that I continue to learn is that while there is no cure, it is very temporary. the isolating feeling, the terror that you feel, all you have to do is hang on, and it will pass. And that I need to be, I think that probably the biggest thing I've learned is that I'm responsible for my reactions to things, and I'm responsible for my well-being. So nobody is going to do it for me. Nobody owes me anything, and the world does not change for me. I have to change so I can enjoy the world.
Yes. Yes. What do you not put up with anymore?
I love this question. What I don't put up with anymore are situations and saying yes to things that are going to put me at risk for my mental health and my emotional well-being, and fear of letting somebody down or being judged. I have evolved as a person, in that during that evolution I kind of have changed and what I do and how I act, and what my day-to-day life is like. And I no longer put up with the judgment if I am not doing what somebody around me wants me to do.
Yes. And that is so important because I do believe, people pleasing end up really chopping at someone's dignity and your mental health. And the fear of being judged, like it's because we all want to be liked. It's part of the people pleasing. And it's very hard not to do. And we all, most of us do it, but it's so important to just hold on to yourself. Because like you said, you can put yourself at risk of a down spiral by doing that.
Oh, I've done it so many times.
Yeah.
It is something I'm no longer putting up with in my life.
Yeah.
It's an uncomfortable decision to make, but it's an imperative one.
But you know what the thing is that with that, once you respect yourself and, say no to things because, they're not good for you, you also all of a sudden become acutely aware of people who are quite toxic for you, or
Yes.
they are themselves probably still quite people pleasing, and they don't want to be judged. So they unconsciously want you to do the same because they have to struggle through that and they suffer through that. And once you've become aware of that, I mean, in my experience, I completely detach. I don't care what they say. I don't care what they think, because I know that person isn't good for me. And years ago, I would have bent over backwards to do what, to make sure they were happy and they didn't say anything bad about me. And now I'm like, you know what? No, that's fine. You have your path, I have mine.
Yep, you're taking the words right out of my mouth. I think that's a very important thing for us all to learn, and that sometimes it's okay to separate a little bit, and whether that's a person, a place, or a thing that we have to separate ourselves from. That it's so important it's not selfish to put yourself first if it's being detrimental to your health.
Hmm.
And once you know better in your mental health, you have to do better. So repeating the same mistakes and not expecting the same outcome, that's never going to get us anywhere. So I think it's something that is not easy for me, but definitely something that I am pushing forward on in this year.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think putting ourselves first is not selfish. I mean, we're not psychopaths or narcissistic people. I think, if we putting ourselves first in the sense that we look after ourselves, we become more generous because we have more to give. Our cup is more full.
For sure.
So, Jordan, this has been just amazing. Thank you so much. Can you please tell us where people can find you,
Yes, of
all of the
course.
places and everything that you do, please?
Yes. Well, thank you so much for having me, because this has been so wonderful for me as well. And I feel really cool. So thank you. And you can find Listen Lucy, all of our handles for across the board, social media wise, is at Listen Lucy, one word, ListenLucy. And then our website is listenlucy.org.
Perfect. And I'll put the links in the show notes as well, so everyone will be able
Wonderful.
to see that. So listen, this was, actually, why is it called Listen Lucy and not Listen Jordan?
Yes. My mom gave me the nickname Lucy when I was really, really young, and she still calls me Lucy now. No reason behind it. She just did. and I'm a writer. So the alliteration of Listen Lucy sounded way better than Listen Jordan. If it was named Listen Jordan, we wouldn't even be having this interview right now.
Yeah. Yeah. One sounds more strict than the other one. It's almost like you're asking someone else to listen to you.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So she's very happy to have a part in the name.
I bet. That's really good. Well, thank you so much, Jordan. And yeah, hopefully I'll speak to you soon.
Okay. Thank you so much, Angie. This has been great.
And that's our episode. I hope you enjoyed it. Please don't forget to rate, review, subscribe on iTunes, follow on Spotify, for all the other platforms. Whichever way you show love is how you can support the show. Drop me your questions or suggestions for future episodes via the website at angie-s.com, or come and find me on Instagram. I have 2 accounts. One is Too Old for This Shit Podcast, and the other one is Not Too Old For with the number 4. Links in the show notes. See you next week, and until then,
Using health inappropriately.